Constitution is probably one of the greatest legal documents ever written. The problem is, most people never read it, even though that's the absolute foundation of our political system, our court system, our governmental system. Most people have never read it. Just a beautiful day. I mean, it's January, probably 50 degrees right now, and I just love when it's like this. The snow can stay in the mountains. So I get asked oftentimes as an attorney, particularly one that does criminal defense work, how can you represent those people? And I think it's always funny that they say that, because usually I wind up representing them or a family member someday when they call me, because somebody inevitably will always know someone in their family or friend, close friend, that will more than likely get in trouble with the law. Whether it's something simple like a traffic ticket even, or a DUI, everyone, and whether you're charged with a homicide or a traffic ticket, everybody is given the same constitutional rights. And so, even if everyone may think that a person accused of a crime is guilty, and sometimes they are, many times they are, but many times they're not. And many times they're not charged with exactly what maybe they did. Maybe the district attorney charged the case higher than it should. And so that's when you need somebody like myself, or any attorney that does criminal defense. Not any attorney, because frankly, it takes a special type of person to do criminal defense work. You truly have to love not only defending your clients, but the Constitution. The Constitution is probably one of the greatest legal documents ever written. The problem is, most people never read it, even though that's the absolute foundation of our political system, our court system, our governmental system. Most people have never read it. And usually when people read it, they say, wow, it's so simple. It's really not that long. So anyone accused of a crime, whether it's a serious felony or a misdemeanor, has certain rights. Everyone. They have the right to make the government prove the charge beyond a reasonable doubt to each and every element of the offense unanimously to a jury. They're entitled to the presumption of innocence. The presumption of innocence is paramount in our system. It's paramount that says you are presumed innocent until and if the prosecution can prove each and every one of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they can't, it would be the jury's job and oath and obligation to find the defendant not guilty. At a trial, you'd have a right to confront and cross-examine your accusers. That's called the Confrontation Clause. The most incredible truth-seeking tool ever created. The adversarial litigation process, I say again, is the greatest truth-seeking tool ever made. And in many countries, obviously, that right doesn't exist. In the United States, we are absolutely lucky to do that, have that. You have a right to present evidence in your own defense, to call witnesses. If they wouldn't come voluntarily, you have a right, if you couldn't afford it, to make the prosecution, the state, the government, compel those witnesses to come voluntarily or through subpoena power. And if you are indigent, you would have the state pay for the necessary witness to appear. Then additionally, in a trial, you have a right to testify or not to testify if you're the accused. And the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is one of the greatest things also ever invented, because if you're accused of a crime, you do not have to prove yourself innocent. The government must prove you guilty. Because if someone is accusing you of a crime, they're the ones that should have to back it up. They're the ones that should have to prove it. And so you can never be compelled to testify against yourself. Now you have an absolute right to testify, and if you chose to testify, you would be cross-examined as the defendant, just like any other witness. Now that decision doesn't have to be made until the prosecution has rested their case and you've seen all the evidence that they intend to call. That little girl just asked if I was vlogging. So then ultimately, after the decision is made to testify, or not to testify, and if a defendant elects not to testify, the judge would instruct the jury that they could not use his silence against him in any way. They cannot consider that he has something to hide, or he's not being truthful, or that he should tell his side of the story. Okay? And once again, it's right against self-incrimination. It's a beautiful right. Then the jury would decide, and if you went to trial and you lost, you'd have a right to appeal to a higher court to see if a legal error was made which resulted in an unfair trial. And then the appellate courts would decide if it was fair, if it was a fair trial. Sometimes they say there was error, but that the error was harmless. And it basically means, yeah, the judge didn't have to give you a perfect trial, but you're not entitled to a perfect trial, you're just entitled to a fair trial. Although how can it be fair if it wasn't perfect, I guess? But needless to say, that's not the state of the law. Now, on the other hand, if you entered a plea of guilty to a charge, which means you give up all those rights that we just talked about, so there would be no making the prosecution prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously to a jury, no cross-examine, no witnesses being called, no decision whether to testify or not to testify. You enter a plea of guilty, but that plea of guilty must be voluntarily made. And that statement of voluntarily made, when you do that, it means that you admit as a matter of law and as a matter of fact that you are guilty of what you're pleading guilty to. Now sometimes that's made up, but the law will always look at you, the law will always look at you as that is what you did and that's what you pled guilty to. And that plea that one makes must be known and voluntarily made. Basically know what you're doing, you're aware of the penalties. The charge that you're pleading guilty to. No one is forcing you or coercing you to enter into that guilty plea. And you have to be aware of the possible sentences that are available to the court, whether it be prison, jail, probation, or simply a fine only.